Hey, this is Nikki Lane, and you're listening to Recess with Spinelli.
Alexander Spinelli here, WSPN 91.1 FM, Skidmore College Radio, and Recess with Spinelli. And today we are here with the outlaw country singer-songwriter based in Nashville, Tennessee, Nikki Lane. So much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
You are described as country music for people who don't like country, as well as outlaw country. So what exactly is all that?
I think what it really comes down to is trying to give people terms that are relatable enough for them to put you in some sort of box. Obviously, I've spent most of my career trying to stay out of a box in general, but when you're reaching out to fans, you do need to have words that allow people to identify. And country music now, I believe, when you say the word country music, most people think of pop country because they think of what's on the radio, and you have to say like old-timey country or something to like reference Hank Williams. So it's hard for me to just say I'm a country artist anymore because people will shirk and like dust it off when it might actually be, much more well-rounded than what they're perceiving. And so we've created a list of words that we're happy to use that allow people to kind of like, I think take some of the preconceived notion out of what we're going to sound like and give it a listen.
What gravitates you towards more of that vintage, older country sound as opposed to more of the modern sound?
Well, in general, I think that the modern country music, to me, just sounds like pop music, and I wasn't trying to make a pop record. I want you to wake up with my song stuck in your head. That's a strong melody, but I don't think that the production value behind that has to be compromised just because of the genre we're playing. The vintage influence comes from everything. I mean, all my clothes are vintage because I like looking for them and finding them. Same thing with guitars, same thing with our friends and the music that we listen to. We just like digging deep. Just now in the past few years, I feel like there are more new references, bands that I would actually be into drawing from that are our age and that are our of our decade, but for the most part I've just always fascinated over those genres and 50s, 60s, 70s, and so it just kind of came through. When you start to make records, you're not looking at your friends' records for references, you're looking at old stuff, you know what I mean, to steer clear of those new people and not be stepping on toes. Do
you consider it maybe sterile and a little bit devoid of what country ought to be?
Well, I just think it's prefabricated, and it makes sense. I mean, when you look at country and rap as like two of the biggest forms of revenue, like it's like for music, you know what I mean? Like they're the ones that are still selling millions of records. They're playing it safe. It makes sense. They're going to put $1 million into marketing something. It makes sense for them to play it safe. I don't care about dumbing it down because I'd like to make that many fans. I'd like to have that big of a presence, but I don't want to sit in a room with multiple people and decide whether or not everyone upstairs is going to absolutely love it, which really just means that it's going to be a comfortable thing. I'm of the opinion that I probably won't ever sell 1 million records because most of my fans probably just steal them, and I just need to get my records sitting on a Walmart shelf if I wanted to.
So do you ever find it difficult getting airplay or media coverage, not being that mainstream country? For
sure. I mean, country radio basically doesn't touch my records or any of my peers, and so we fall into independent stations and non-com and AAA and formats where I'm happy to be, because I feel like the programmers and the listeners they're searching for something a little bit different. And it's a long fight. It would be great if pop country radio thought that Right Time or Sleep with a Stranger belonged in their format. Like, we're not going to turn it away, but I'm not going to take the bass out of the mix or whatever the concept is that we would have to buy into to be able to participate.
So is this something that you have managed to find a way to make a career, an actual money earner out of so far?
Well, I had to, I'm a business person by nature that happens to make music, so I never played the artist card where I wouldn't compromise certain things to be able to pay my bills. I still bartended, all the time when I was home up until a year ago. And I went out on my own touring and didn't bring bands because I needed to make money. Last year, when I wanted to take a band out and change my presence, I had to figure out how to make more money. So I upped my merch game. I started selling things online. I have my High Class Hillbilly, which is, me buying and selling vintage on tour, which is just about finding opportunity, finding something for $20 that's worth $100. That's $80 that I can put in my pocket when I know that I have to give away anything I'm making at a show to have a full band. So it's just about being innovative, I think. And but we broke even for the first time on tour in December last year, which is actually a big feat for a small band, to come home with any money in your pocket and not be like figuring out where the next dollar is going to come from a month ahead to pay for what we're spending tonight. And it looks good, you know what I mean? But I think that's about like continued, a lot of people steal your record. fine. You know, my label's not happy with that, but fine. You want to listen to it on Spotify? I don't blame you. I do the same thing. I want to hear 50 records a day. I'll listen to Spotify. Go buy my t-shirt. You know what I mean? It puts money in my pocket. Like, it allows me to drive around in circles to come see fans, you know? And I think when artists are trying to make that clear to their fans, and fans are really interested in supporting their artists that they like, it makes it easy for us to come out ahead. And my manager and I were talking about this recently, because last night Shaky's manager asked me, he said, where's all your money? I said, what money? And he said, you know what I'm talking about. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, Lee told me what you do with your money. And I buy more merch, and I buy more wholesale, because that is money, and it's actually worth twice what I paid for it. So I reinvest. I mean, like, we just barely made a little bit of money this year. I'm trying to buy a new rig, like a Sprinter instead of a van. It's like, putting money in my pocket right now wouldn't do any of us any good. It's really just about, upping the game so that we can run alongside of the big boys and hopefully be one of them one day.
So instead of investing in stocks, you invest in clothing, essentially.
Well, essentially myself. Just stuff that I'm going to get the return on. But yeah.
So if for some chance your music career failed, let's hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
But so what would you ideally go back into fashion?
I think I would go back into fashion. It was more about manufacturing. I definitely think there's tons of things that need to be made in China or outsourced to other countries, just based on the fact that Americans want everything to be affordable and i.e. cheap, because they want one of everything. You know what I mean? Like, in the 40s, you didn't have every single color blouse that was available at the Walmart or the Target or the wherever, Macy's. And now I think that it's about instant gratification. I think with the surge of this hipster thing that's happening, you start to see a lot of makers. Like, we're starting to see a lot of American-made shoes, American-made hats, like people that are making stuff. And I would work to, and I will do so even if the career goes really well, continue to work to shine a light on things that I believe you could pay a little bit more for and buy once and buy from your buddy, and and be more internally sustainable as a country. Not just because of outsourcing, but because it's cool.
And that also goes back into investing into each other as well, in a way.
For sure. And that's the other thing. I spend all my money constantly spreading it around on tips and homeless and friends and investments, and because it doesn't do anyone any good in their pockets. As long as you're working hard to keep bringing it in, it's better, in my opinion, to keep putting it in other people's pockets so that we can keep the pot stirring.
Now, your latest album, All or Nothing, you worked with Dan from the Black Keys. Mm-hmm. How did that exactly influence or change your outlook or production for writing songs or an album as a whole?
Yeah, well, I think my mentality for an album has stayed the same pretty much since I started. I want to make a mixtape more than a unified sound all the way across. Just, I think it makes it easier for me to want to listen to the whole record. So I assume that it makes it easier for some other people to want to listen to the whole record and not just the single or what have you. So in that way, I feel like I came in with a firm footing. But I've only been playing music 5 years, which means I'm not any good at it. You know what I mean? Like, I can play all my own songs and a few covers now, but it's been a slow process, and I had to trust people like Dan and like my previous producers to sculpt me, teach me how to work with a band, teach me how to talk to a band. Like, when you're working with 5 creatives, like, you can get pretty much anything you want out of them, but there's a different way to talk, probably to each of them individually and to them as a whole, to be respectful of the fact that, like, you're all creating it, and so when we talk about the record, I always think it's like, Dan made the record, but the greatest thing I think he did was the people he pulled together, because we always talk about recording, but there's the recording, the mixing, the mastering, like, what I mean, the engineering, the guy that made it to where we never had to stop in the studio because he was facilitating and bringing food. It's like, and that's what I like is watching somebody like Dan put a big team together that supports the record as a whole and makes it to where we can go in there and we can throw around ideas and move quickly, and get such a record done for the amount of money we did, which, making a record with somebody like Dan is expensive. So he made it doable for me, which I thought was really cool.
Now, do you find it difficult at all or challenging to separate yourself from the content of music, being that it's largely autobiographical, right?
Yeah, it's not difficult anymore because I with music and with quitting my job to play music for a living, I was like positive reinforcement. If people came to the show, it meant that it was worth continuing to play music. Making a record became the same thing. At first, it was touchy to write about my own divorce or my own problems with my friends or my family. And there are certain songs that I wrote that will just never surface because they might be about things that are too deep and too tangible in my personal life that, like, I don't want you to ask questions about. Like, I wrote them as a means of healing. That's essentially how I started writing in general. But it's funny when you put put out a record and you're a little bit vulnerable, the people, the way they respond, because everybody's going through the same thing all the time. We love to mirror it and act like that girl's the girl cheating and that guy's the guy that like wrecked the home and this one, but like it's happening all around us all the time. You know what I mean? We're looking in gossip mags like, what are the Kardashians doing, when like the guy that's your buddy at church is doing the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's easy to act like it only happens to you, but I think for me, being vulnerable and putting it out there, I realized it was happening to everybody, and the more I wrote about it, the more I was able to truly relate to the people that are coming out here, you know, to say thanks and to come to the shows.
Now, you and Dan did a lovely duet with the song Love's on Fire. Was that difficult or challenging at all, having or working with another songwriter and singer for a song that might be autobiographical?
We got really lucky. You know, that actually was the last song. It was the last day of the studio, and it was the last. It was the last thing we wrote, and we wrote it in an hour and a half because we didn't have anything to write. And so we both, I mean, obviously you hear Dan's lines and he's talking about being broke and there's not enough money to go around, and like that clearly wasn't happening in his personal life at that stage that we wrote that record. But we were just identifying with, you know, like again, like ourselves and our peers that are all musicians, and just what it's like the misconception of like the person that's staying at home, what they think you're out doing every night. You know what I mean? Like I would be literally, when I was married and I wasn't a musician, sitting at home and perceiving what my husband was doing out on tour, and now I'm out here and I'm like, oh, okay, like you're up till 2, there are girls everywhere, doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like, you're working. And so some of those things are a relief, because when you start to listen back to them, again, I think I identify with them even more, and kind of like tear down the way I felt about something before I put, you know, as much thought into it as to make a song out of it and sing it over and over.
So is there anything else you would like to add?
That's it. You know, like I said, try to come out to our shows. I mean, we want to build a following up here. It's like, it's hard. You keep making loops around and around trying to build a following, and that's what we're trying to do. So if you take a listen and you like it, come say hi.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Recess with Spinelli, WSPN 91.1 FM, Skidmore College Radio, and we've been speaking with Miss NIKKI Lane.